This is a season of motion and activity. Some of you have been traveling. For others, you're just waiting for days when we close out 2021 and we enter into 2022. But for those of you who have traveling or will be traveling, this morning I thought we'd just take a second. I just kind of wanted to introduce you to this really old backpack that I have. This is like my travel backpack, and this backpack literally has been all over the world. And every time I travel, I take this backpack with me. So it's been to exotic places like Indianapolis, but it was also with me on the day that we had a confrontation with a voodoo doctor in Haiti. It was also with Adam and I. Adam's are producing this online service right now. Adam and I were in Kazakhstan, and this backpack survived a KGB interrogation a few years ago. And so this backpack has been some places and done some things. And when I travel, there's certain things that I like to take with me. If I'm going on a long trip, I like to have a good neck pillow. I like to have that and take that with me. And obviously, you got to have your AirPods. And then if you're going on a long flight, you may want a little Tylenol PM, so you have that. You're for sure going to want to have something good to read as you're on the journey. That's always something important to take along on the trip as you begin to go. But one of the things that when we do traveling, and everybody does traveling a little bit different, and everybody has idiosyncrasies, and everybody has certain things that they like to travel with and take with them, there's always this motion and commotion that follows us in travel. And some of you struggle from motion sickness, right? And that motion sickness can make a lot of things. So maybe you have Dramamine, or maybe you have patches that you have to put in your travel backpack and your travel bag as well to kind of prepare for the journey. But motion sickness does some things, and it can happen when we're in a car or a plane or a boat, and it can also happen in other areas of our life. Motion sickness is a very interesting thing because it causes nausea. And nausea is a word that we actually get from the Greeks, and it's called seasickness. The word is nausea, but it actually means seasickness. And so some people, and I have a couple family members where they get motion sick. And motion sickness, and there's a lot of different theories on it, but motion sickness essentially is this idea that your brain gets mixed signals. So for some of you, you get motion sick in the car. And why do you get motion sickness in the car? It's because you're looking out the window and your eyes are looking out the window and they go, man, we are going really, really fast. But your sense of touch goes, no, we're not. We're sitting still in a chair. We're not moving at all. And the eyes go, no, we're moving. I can see we're moving. And your sense of touch goes, I don't feel any wind. We're sitting in a chair. What happens is they get a does not compute. Something's not right. We're getting information that's competing with one another because I don't feel wind, so obviously we're not moving, but I see it, we are, and ultimately that makes you just want to vomit or get sick in the car. And it can happen on a plane or a boat where you begin to have different senses that don't feel things correctly, and as a result, your brain, your mind sends chemicals that go, hey, the information we're getting isn't right, and it makes you sick. It makes you motion sick. Well, every time we have a transition in our life, every time we move through different pieces of our life, there can be this sense of motion sickness as well. Some of you may have experienced this past year. You've gone through major events. Some of you have started school. Some of you have finished school. Some of you started jobs. Some of you were terminated in jobs. Some of you started relationships, some of you had relationships end, some of you had marriages, some of you had divorces, and in the midst of all of those changes and all that motion, there's this sense of motion sickness that takes place. Motion sickness can occur like this, where someone comes up to you and goes, aren't you so glad that the pandemic's over? And then all of a sudden the next sentence you hear is, hey, can I introduce you to my friend Omicron? I think we're gonna keep it going for a while. And what happens is your mind goes, I want to be done, but I'm not. And it creates this sense of motion sickness. So what do we do when we experience these things in our life like motion sickness? How do we do? Well, if you were to talk to a gymnast or you talk to a diver, or even if you just play pin the tail on the donkey, or you're in a backyard game and you just kind of put your head on a bat and twirl around for a while, everyone will tell you who does that. Maybe you're in dance and you're spinning and whatever you do with those, will tell you you have to anchor on something. You have to focus on one thing, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today, because one of the things that we find as we look at this is an anchor can make all the difference. An anchor can make all the difference in our life when life seems to be spinning, when transitions seem to be going quicker than we can manage, when there are seasons of our life where it feels like we don't have control, and the end result of us feeling out of control is there's this out-of-body experience where we just feel like numb or nauseous, or maybe we feel like we're watching ourselves live and we don't even feel like we're living in there. And in those moments, we need an anchor. Now, I'll tell you right now, an anchor is only as good as what it's tethered to or connected to. I mean, if you're in a boat and the boat sinks and you grab your anchor and go, but we had an anchor, obviously that doesn't really matter very much. And so what I want to do this morning is I want us to all get out the book of Hebrews, and if you don't, we'll put the verses on the screen. And I want to look at this book of Hebrews because in it gives us very explicit instructions from the Bible, and it begins to tell us that we need an anchor in our lives to hold on to during moments of transition in our life. When we begin a new year, when we end a season of a year, we need to have, whatever it is, we need to have a focus. We need to have a focus that helps us keep our balance, because if we don't, we're just going to have this sense of motion sickness. So whatever you need, this is something that you're going to want to put into your travel bag. But Hebrews chapter 6, verse 16 says, people swear by someone greater than themselves. Now, this is so deep, it's really, really deep, and honestly, I'm not really smart enough to explain it all, but we all need something greater than ourselves to stabilize us, is what the verse is saying. We need something bigger than ourselves, something greater than ourselves to stabilize ourselves. We need more than our own opinions. We need more than our own mirror. We need more than our own count. We need something beyond our own opinions and our own advice to help stabilize us in moments and seasons of transitions. So he continues, people swear by someone greater than themselves, and the oath confirms what is said and puts an end to all arguments. Now, in that is a promise. Now, what it is the oath that confirms the promise. So, let me give you an example of what a promise is. Hey, after we're done watching this today, we'll go get ice cream, right? That's a promise. An oath is, I swear on my grandma's life that tonight we'll get ice cream. Big difference. One's like, yeah, we'll get ice cream after we're done watching with this, I promise. The other one is, I'm going to make an oath on my grandma's life that in this moment tonight we will get ice cream. Let's go on to verse 17. Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose, he used the fixed point here, the unchanging purpose, the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to his heirs, those who follow after him and come after him, of what he promised. And he confirmed this promise with an oath. Now, stay with me, because the Hebrew people and the people of God are going through very similar things that we did, where their lives were having a lot of transitions, a lot of changes, and there are people who are getting motion sickness knowing what's next. And so you'll see why this matters so much in just a minute, but God has an unchanging nature, and that's going to make all the difference here in just a second. Because why does this matter? This is how we're going to look at this. Verse 18. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. God can't lie. So if he promised and he made an oath, it's incapable, it's impossible for God to lie. And there's going to begin to kind of give us a parenthetical nature about who God is and what God is, and that God can't lie. So he never writes a check that's going to bounce. He never kind of makes a promise that he's not there for. There's never ice cream that's not fulfilled, all those things. The problem is we usually think that God has promised or God owes us things that God never said. But the things that he did say, God is faithful and God will always promise, especially for those of you who are in transitions right now that you wouldn't have chosen, or you're in transitions right now that you're not sure how it's going to go. And so knowing what God has promised is of utmost importance to you. Let's go back to verse 18. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set right before us, those of us, we're going to be greatly encouraged. that motion sickness that you keep feeling, you're going to be encouraged. Now, he's speaking to people who have been in a huge transition, huge. The Jewish descent grew up, believing one worldview, and then something happened, and now they're all trying to figure out a new life, and that's kind of not unusual for people who have been in the midst of traumatic chaos, and lives have been upturned and turned all the way. And what he says, verse 19, he says, we have this hope as an anchor. Talk to anybody who does motion, gymnasts, divers, pin the tail on a donkey, people that stretch. Focus on the wall. You have an anchor for your soul, and it's firm and it's secure. Because not just your brain or your mind, but your soul needs an anchor. Your soul was designed to be anchored to something, and that is where we get hope. So if you've been in situations where you felt hopeless lately, and this year's just going to be like last year, and this semester is going to be like last semester, that means most likely what you're anchored to isn't firm, and it's not secure. Because if you're anchored to what God's saying here, if your anchor is connected to the hope in God and the hope in Jesus, then God's promises are true, his oath is legit, and hope is the most powerful resource available to your motion-sick soul. Because an anchor provides the ability to ride out a storm. An anchor can ride out a transition. And it's not just any kind of hope. This is a God-infused, like Jesus-approved hope that even when you can't figure out what the next step is, even when you can't see what the next step is, because you're just kind of hunkered down, it begins to give us something to focus and to hold on to. It's a hope that we can attach to in all kinds of transitions of our life. So, what's God trying to teach you in this transition of your life? What's God trying to teach you through this start of this new thing? Or what's God trying to teach you through the end of something? Because in those moments, there's going to be motion in your life. And that motion is going to call into question all kinds of things. And you begin to move and you start going, wait, something's not right. It doesn't feel right. I'm getting competing. My brain's going, does not compute, does not compute, does not compute. But when your hope is connected to a relationship in God, all relationships are the amount of hope we put into a relationship is directly proportionate to the amount of trust we have in that relationship. And what God's promise is saying, look, you can trust me with your life because I've been faithful and trustworthy for generation after generation after generation after generation. And your life and your circumstances and the transition and the new year and all these pieces that are right on the horizon, your life is not without hope. It's not over because of what God has done for you and wants to do through you. So why is this transition still happening? Why are you going through these changes? Why are all these things happening? I don't know. But God just may use this in your life for you to have the opportunity to anchor, to tether to something more than your own opinions and your own ideas. So I know some of you are coming to transitions right now in your life and you're so excited. I mean, the thought of it is just exhilarating. And others of you are coming through transitions that you are surprised for and wanted no part of, and it was kind of dumped on you and moved through that, and it's causing pain. No matter the circumstances that bring you into this moment of transition, I want you to know in the middle of the motion, which may cause commotion, which may cause does not compute, in the midst of the nausea, God has said, I want you to rely on me as an anchor, as a fixed point in this moment to get you through. Can I pray with you this morning? Father, today we are glad and grateful that you're our God and that you just didn't give us life alone and say, hey, good luck. I created the earth in such a way that it's going to last a while. Have fun, kids. But you've been active in creation, and you're still active in our world, and you come to us from the future, and you're just offering us hope in the form of an anchor, in the form of a fixed point, so that when all the other commotion and motion around us is making us nauseous and exhausted and tired and worn out and anxiety-filled and nervous, you've given us a fixed point, an anchor, so that in the midst of the storm, we're tethered to something greater than ourselves, which is your oath, your promise that you'll never leave us, you'll never forsake us, and you will always be with us. So God, as these final few days of 2021 begin to roll into 2022, may we find ourselves anchored and tethered in you. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. Stick around for just a few more minutes, as you're not going to want to miss. Go ahead and make sure the kids are watching now. Pastor Lindsay, as she begins to communicate with us today.
Hey there, thanks for joining us on YouTube today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to like and subscribe to our page where you can watch previous messages. We hope you found this content helpful and that it adds value to your life. See you next week.